everyone, Cadian Sergeant Steele here, and today I want to walk you through my 1500 point list that I used at the Nova Open narrative. So, just a quick note about this list. This is slightly different than the one I actually took and played with at the Nova Open. The balanced data slate has since dropped just after the Nova Open, and with that came some point changes that impacted my list. So, what did I have to change? I removed a single Scout Sentinel, and my list was back down to 1,495 points. Pretty well balanced, I would say. That also makes me feel like I brought a pretty balanced list. So I wanted to share it with you all and why I chose to take this list to the narrative events. Quick correction to the video. You may see some references to a Tech Priest engines here. That is not actually in the list, so please just ignore that during the video. So first thing you're going to notice is that there is a lot of infantry in this list. In total, I have 60 models just for the Cadian shock troops, not counting my Cadian Command Squads, my Cadian Castellans. All in all, that's a lot of hefty models to move around, so I do have movement trays here that I use for that. The point of that was, I feel that as a guard player, infantry is the key. And they die pretty easily, even though we have the 2 CP reinforcement stratagem to bring them back, right? They get looked at by a Space Marine and they disappear. To deal with that, what I've done is I've broken that down into 2 squads of 20 and then 2 squads of 10. What that allows me to do is have 2 squads that can expose themselves and weather some of the fire. Maybe even intentionally at times to draw my opponent's fire. And then maybe I intend to resurrect them with the reinforcement stratagem and then bring them back in to rush back onto an objective. Because remember, the benefit of shock troop is that they have sticky objective, which basically means, that's not the actual name of it, it's shock troops is the name of their ability. What that means is once they've held an objective, I get to keep holding that objective even after they're no longer on it. Whether they've moved off and moved forward into the game or they've been destroyed, I still hold that objective. So it gives me some flexibility to come off objectives and still score those. The 2 10-man squads, they're meant to get on the things, to come in via strategic reserves, capture objectives, and hide. They are not meant to engage. They will if the right target presents itself, but that's not what they're there for. Each of these squads has the same loadout per 10 models. I have a drum-fed autogun, flamer, melt-a-gun, voxcaster. The same the whole way through. This keeps it real easy for me to play. I don't have to memorize a whole bunch of different weapons, and I can deal with hordes, I can deal with elites, and I can put out a lot of firepower. And that's what matters to me. To help lead them, I've brought 2 Cadian Command Squads, 2 Cadian Castellans, and a regimental attaché attachment for one of the command squads. The reason I do that is because I wanted to bring a well-rounded list, and the regimental attachés help with that. I get the buff of no deep strike within 12 inches of the astropath. I get +1 to hit to 1 unit the Master of the Fleet can see, and I get sustained hits 1 from the Master of Ordnance on 1 target as well. All of those are great little buffs, given I have an aircraft, artillery, and I also want to keep my opponent out of my backfield. The Cadian Castellans perform another important role, and what they do is allow me to get in the thick of it, to get into melee, fall back, and shoot, which is huge. These 2 Cadian Command Squads with the Castellans, with the regimental attachés, will be combined with each of the 20-man units. This way, if they do get engaged, because remember, they're going to expose themselves, they're going to get in the thick of it, they get into combat, and I will always warn my opponent, hey, I can fall back and shoot. And that's exactly what I'll do, allowing me to be more effective in the fight. Now, I usually take the enhancement to get the extra order on my Castellan that's also with the regimental attaché and one of the command squads. So this way I can chuck out 3 orders from that one kind of blob of leaders and 2 orders from the other one. What I'll typically do is take the one with 3 orders and place it near the Earthshaker carriages. So this is the other sweet spot of the list. Now, you might be saying, but Sergeant Steele, as of the filming of this video, the points have gone up on these, and they're now and 20 points a carriage. So these are the Forge World models, right? And they come, you're supposed to have 5 troops with them to help count the wounds. What makes these special is that they have the regiment keyword. That is very different from the Basilisk, which has the squadron keyword. So in other words, without Leontis, and I don't have Leontis in this list, right? Just 2 Cadian Castellans as my potential warlords. So with that, these won't receive tank orders, right? The kind of old version of tank orders. They're going to receive orders from the Castellans and the command squads, which is absolutely key. So I can give them +1 to hit every single time if I have one of these guys within 24 inches. The other great thing that these do is they give -2 to movement to infantry units that they hit. Now that's because of the way they've done the infantry keyword in 10th edition. That's a lot of units that these can give -2 to movement on. I can prevent my opponent from making a charge, from moving on to an objective, on and on. I don't necessarily have to hamper my opponent by killing his units. I could simply just hit them with these and prevent them from being able to accomplish their goals in the game. Now, the downside to these is that they only have 6 wounds. They're toughness 7 with a 4-up save. They're not as survivable. They're only 15 points cheaper than a Basilisk, which is much more resilient. But because of their ability to receive orders, I don't have to make the investment of a tank commander with an enhancement just to be able to issue 2 orders to these, which is a big point sink. I mean, that's another carriage worth of shots. And to be honest with you, to get something like +1 to hit for the cost of a whole unit, I would honestly just rather bring another carriage, if that's the way I'm thinking about it. But for the cost of 40 points or 65 points or whatever my investment is for my command units here, that's well worth it. And that's points well spent. So they're the effective part of my list, along with the infantry. Now, to have fun with it, I did bring some wonky things. This is a third-party version, but this is the Tarantula. That is also typically a Forge World model. What's cool about this is I can set it kind of in the mid or backfield, and it's unit ability. So it's got twin-linked heavy bolters, right? Sustained hits 1 on these, twin-linked, so just 3 shots. But it can overwatch for free, even if you've already overwatched. So I had this weird little unit just kind of sitting around that often made my opponents feel a little bit hesitant to move towards it. Honestly, most of the time, it never hit anything. I did have one game where it absolutely wrecked my opponent a little bit, but that's it. It rarely came up. I won't say it's an effective unit, but I wasn't trying to go for a really hard-hitting list. I was trying to have like a nice balance of a little bit of everything. So, and I think that helped accomplish it. Same with the Earthshaker carriages. If my opponent wanted to target them and take them out, they definitely could. I could hide them to get +1 of my saves if I'm somewhat obscured by terrain. But if my opponent wanted to get to them, they were going to get to them. And especially if they get charged, they're pretty much done. The other kind of synergy, my list has a lot of synergies, is I have 2 Scout Sentinels. Now, I originally had 3, but because of the points updates, I had to choose to cut something. So I got rid of one of those. I was running 1 Las Cannon, 2 Heavy Flamers, each in their own independent unit. I would typically spend my reinforcement stratagem to bring these back. I believe the 2 CP reinforcement stratagem is worth it even to bring back a single Scout Sentinel. So what these were able to do is with the Heavy Flamers and the Sentinel Chainsaws, they were able to threaten the infantry holding objectives in the midpoint of the table and to also draw in fire from my opponent. Especially with their scout move at 9 inches at the beginning of the game, it allowed me to either hide them or really move forward and take control of the board early on. The Hunter-Killer missiles, they're kind of fickle, but I still brought them anyways. And everything in my army is WYSIWYG, by the way. So if I don't have Hunter-Killers or something on it, then I don't play it. But these here were able to move around and really just harass my opponent. And the other great thing about reinforcements is if it happened in the midpoint of the game, like turn 3, right? Or turn 2, I would bring these in, then on turn 3, into my opponent's deployment zone and threaten their backfield objective. Because with 10 inches of movement, they can really get around and be very effective. So I highly recommend Scout Sentinels. The other thing, obviously, is with their recon ability, they give rerolls of 1 to hit against a unit within 18 inches. And then they get the artillery to ignore the negatives of the indirect fire ability. Now, to me, I'm interpreting that to mean my opponent still does get their cover save, right? That's not a negative, that's a positive to my opponent. The negatives are the -1 to hit because of indirect. So that would allow me to hit on 3s with the Earthshaker carriages. I don't believe that with 2 Earthshaker carriages and 2 Scout Sentinels is too overpowered. It was effective, but I wasn't like picking my opponent's units up off the table. That's not what was happening. I was mostly dealing some wounds, finishing up a few units, or just slowing down some movement. So I feel like at this point level, this is 1,500 points. At 1,500 points, this is fairly balanced in its effectiveness. The next thing is the Beast of Burden back there. So we got the Rogal Dorn, and this one is equipped with the Oppressor Cannon, Auto Cannon. It's got Meltas, Multi-Meltas, and a Castigator Gatling Cannon. Oh, and a Heavy Stubber, of course. Like I said, it's WYSIWYG. So this here is meant to be very well-rounded. With the Meltas and the Oppressor Cannon, the Auto Cannon, I could hurt elites and vehicles fairly well. You know, I'm fishing for 5s on the Melta, but I have 6 shots. That's enough. I'm going to probably get a 5 with one of those, if not 2 of them, and to be able to roll for that D6 or D6 plus 2 damage. With the Castigator Gatling Cannon, with its 12 shots, and the Heavy Stubber up top, and don't forget that's rapid fire 3. So on the chance you get that in the half range, and it's range 36 inches, so 18-inch range, you can get 6 shots out of your Heavy Stubbers. That's a lot of shots. So between those two, potential 18 shots, I could also deal with light infantry in the area, or pluck off the last few wounds on something. And of course, with the Oppressor Cannon, it's effective, and its strength is good enough, and its AP is good enough, and its flat damage 3 is great. I don't think I was picking up my opponent's units, but every time I would wound them pretty significantly and then could pick them off maybe with something else, a Melta gun or from my units or something else could help finish them off. But the one thing that the Rogal Dorn does, it is a deterrent. So what I discovered is that my opponents didn't usually want to shoot it unless they were confident they could try to take it out in one turn. And only one player did. One opponent, the Blood Angels opponent, when I was playing on the trench table, took it out one shot. I think I nearly cried. So I played 9 other games, and this didn't survive every game, but my opponents were hesitant to shoot it, and it really lasted a long time. That helps me have something on the table that my opponents don't really know how to deal with. It's high toughness and high wounds, and then with the Tech Priest boosting it, just kind of really says, haha, you can't touch me. And at the same time, it's driving around, not removing my opponent's army necessarily. It's effective, but it was definitely getting the job done and then forcing my opponent to maybe sometimes have to waste shots or think critically about it. Its Albative Plating ability to be able to reduce one attack to 0 damage is really phenomenal too. If you all go and watch the battle report with Slider Games, that came into play against the Tau. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I really hope when we get a codex in the future, we get to keep that ability. It was really wonderful. Last but not least is the Thunderbolt. This is my way of just bringing some pretty wild units that my opponents probably never get to play against, right? Who actually has Earthshaker carriages? Who actually has a Tarantula? Who actually has a Thunderbolt? I'm an avid collector of the Guard, and I wanted to bring cool things that my opponents could enjoy playing against. This here has an amazing ability, actually, that I didn't even realize until we were most of the way through the event. So its unit ability is that it gets +1 to hit units with fly. That is phenomenal because there are so many units with the fly keyword. Now, not aircraft, the fly keyword. So it goes from hitting on 4s to hitting on 3s. Now, if it's not a fly unit, then you can use your Master of the Fleet and look at a unit within 30 inches visible to him and get +1 to hit that. So you could still hit on 3s even if it's not a fly unit. This thing is strapped with Hellstrike missiles, 2 twin-linked autocannons, and 2 las cannons that are not twin-linked. It's actually just got 2 separate las cannons because Forge World. I do hope they change that later. That is the one frustration I have right now with some of the Forge World rules is they don't follow the typical modeling standards and rule standards in that way. And I think it would just be better for everybody if they did things like change the las cannons to twin-linked changed these autocannons. Well, they already are. They're already set up that way. But other models in the guard range from Forge World are not. So it packs a good punch. The other thing about it is if you don't have the Master of the Fleet bonus, you don't have the +1 to hit fly bonus, then this thing is hitting on 4s and it's pretty swingy. The other thing about the Thunderbolt is that it only has a 3-up save and it has 15 wounds at toughness 10. Now, toughness 10 is pretty good. That's effective. But with the 15 wounds and a 3-up save, that means as soon as your opponent begins applying a multitude of shots or AP, your Thunderbolt's done. It will go down. And I also had a couple opponents take it out very quickly. So it's not the most resilient unit. What you have to hope for is that your Rogal Dorn has already taken out or crippled anything that would threaten your Thunderbolt. It's usually not the case. As you can tell, there's only a modest amount of anti-vehicle in this list. The Hunter Killer missiles, the Oppressor Cannon, and the Thunderbolt's Hellstrike missiles and Las Cannons. Everything else is anti-elite, anti-infantry. So that's where I played against 2 vehicle-heavy lists, and this did not perform well against those. What this performed well against is really well-rounded lists similar to mine, or being able to kind of just outboard control my opponents with just enough infantry and scout sentinels and so forth to move around and really take control of the game. That's the list in a nutshell and how each unit played its role within my army. It was a lot of fun. I would highly recommend this list. Now, for everybody going, okay, Sergeant Steele, yeah, you showed us this really cool 1,500 point list, and I'm never going to buy Forge World. So how is this relevant to me? Great question. Here's what I would recommend. If you don't want to buy something like the Thunderbolt or the Earthshaker carriages, which I don't blame you if you don't want to. There are many reasons not to get into Forge World, not only because of price, it's because I feel like almost at any day these models could just be discontinued and put into Legends. So what you can do is replace the Earthshaker carriages with Basilisks. You won't get the orders, you won't get the +1 to hit, but honestly, I still feel like it's effective. Bringing a Master of the Ordnance for sustained hits 1 and the Scout Sentinels for re-rolling 1s can still be a really effective way of running artillery, even without orders. As you can tell, I brought 2 vehicles, 3 technically, counting the Tarantula, that can't receive orders at all. I did not write this list where I could issue orders to every unit in the army potentially. No, it's only the infantry, the Sentinels, and Earthshaker carriages. Those are the only things that could receive orders. So if you switch it out for Basilisk, I still think they function well. Now, for the Thunderbolt, what you can do is replace it with maybe another couple Scout Sentinels, and that could be really effective as well. Or you could do, like if you get rid of the Tarantula, maybe a Scout Sentinel and a 3rd piece of artillery. I would actually recommend not spamming more than 2, either Basilisk or Earthshaker carriages. I would recommend that your 3rd artillery option be something like a Hydra or a Manticore. And this way, either you can take out fly units, once again, lots of things in the game with the fly keyword. So that's a good thing to bring. It's very likely you will get that buff against your opponents. So I would recommend modifying the list that way. I think it would still be a lot of fun. Or, you know what? Just bring your favorite units, because that's what I did here. I just gathered up some of my favorite models that I've painted for my army and put them in a list. And it was pretty effective and a lot of fun. So if you got Leman Russes you want to play, Hellhounds are fantastic. I love their ability to negate cover. You can definitely do that and it will work well in a list similar to this. That's all I have for you today. I hope you liked the quick breakdown of this list. I hope you enjoyed the video. And as always, have fun wargaming, and Cadia stands.